Hello, this is Sixbolt in Von Doom's lab. This is the first time speaking in a YouTube video, so please be kind. Today I'd like to talk to you about my new project, Hook of the Reaper. So what is Hook of the Reaper? Well, if you know anything about arcades and light guns, you probably heard of MAME Hooker. So what I plan is hopefully to replace MAME Hooker. So why is that? Well, last Christmas my daughter got me two new retro shooter RS3 Reaper light guns. So I started hooking everything up, but downloading software, and everything worked fine except for MAME Hooker. It never really worked. It worked for one game, then crashed after that a lot of the times. And a lot of this is because it's written a long time ago. So I want to say there's, every good thing about MAME Hooker. So it's a great program. People have used it for many years. I just had compatibility problems, and I searched the internet, but I never really talked to anybody. But I also saw a project there, and started coding. So I want to just make sure that everybody knows I'm not trying to put down MAME Hooker or anything. It's a great program. So with Hook of the Reaper, I kind of set out to have 5 goals in mind when I was coding it. The first goal is to do everything that MAME Hooker does with serial port devices, starting with light guns, then I/O controllers, then finally going on to force feedback controllers. And also, since MAME Hooker loads up INI files, I wanted to do the same, which it does. So the second goal is actually to implement a new default light gun game format. So hopefully what this is shooting for is to get rid of the custom INI file. So anybody who gets MAME Hooker actually has to create their own custom INI files to get their light gun working. They have to know the exact COM port, what light gun they have, and put the right commands in. So I'm trying to get rid of a lot of that complexity and try to make one default light gun game file that everybody can use. So I'll talk more on that later. So the third goal is to be open source. So with MAME Hooker, it was written so long ago that there was no open source. Open source programs weren't even a thing back then. So if we had the code, we could easily compile it and get rid of a lot of the compatibility issues that I had. But we just don't have the code. So for this, I wanted to be open source with a GPL license, meaning anybody uses the code, it has to be in an open source project. You can't lock it in. I know that not everybody on the internet follows the rules, but hopefully it will keep it open to anybody who uses this code. My fourth goal is to be platform independent. Now with emulators and arcade and retro gaming, a lot more platforms have come up using, x86, ARM. So it's I wanted to be platform independent and OS independent. And that was why I chose Qt. It has a lot of controls to compile on different platforms. So I can do Windows, Mac, Linux, ARM. I know Raspberry Pis are very, useful for emulator stuff. So I wanted to make sure this can get on any platform since, you have the code. So then the fifth goal is to have the best performance and be multi-threaded. So today, everything pretty much has multiple CPUs in it. Then even the CPU can run multiple threads too. The one computer I have has 12 cores and runs 24 threads. So I want it to be multi-threaded, which currently it is. It's actually runs on 3 threads currently. So you have the main thread, and you have a thread for the TCP socket, then another thread for the serial COM port stuff. So let's move on down. So let's get into actually how to get Hook of the Reaper working with the games with MAME and Demol Shooter. So if you hooked up MAME Hooker before, this should be pretty apparent. There's pretty much one little change with it. So with MAME Hooker, the way it connects into MAME and Demol Shooter is usually with windows talking. So a window will talk to another window. So as you can get a kind of sense for that, it's a very Windows kind of thing. I think Linux and Macs have something kind of close to it, but it wasn't going to work, especially being platform independent with my Goal 4. I needed something else, and luckily, actually, they do actually support a different connection. It's actually the network connection. It uses a TCP socket network connection with the local host, which is IP 127.0.0.1 on port 8000. So if you want to connect into MAME, you actually open kind of the same file up. You'll open up the MAME.ini. So you go into your MAME main directory, and MAME.ini should be right above or below the exe, depending if you have the MAME64.exe or just MAME.exe. So what you're going to search for is OSD output options, which is then for output, instead of Windows, you're going to put network. As I talked about now, since all the platforms have really good network support, this is a really good option. So after you do that, you can just save the file and you're done with MAME. So how do you do Demol Shooter? Well, that's pretty easy too. So you load up the GUI, you click the page selection box, and you go all the way down to outputs. And in the beginning, this is going to be unchecked. So you check that, and usually this will be unchecked, and you can check that too. And you can have all that there. So make sure network outputs will be always on and enable outputs. And you hit save config, and you get a box saying, hey, configuration saved. And you go, okay, and then you're done. Now, Hook of the Reaper will connect to MAME and Demol Shooter. So now let's kind of look at some of that game file stuff. So MAME Hooker uses an INI file to do everything with it. You can do a lot with it. It's very, you can do anything, but you have to write a custom INI game file for pretty much every game. Then your game INI file won't work on your friend's computer because the COM port number could be changed for even the same light gun, depending on what other COM port stuff he has on it. So pretty much everybody's kind of stuck writing their own custom INI game files. They can get it, then change the port numbers, but it doesn't, even if they're doing something else. So I was kind of looking at that and I said, okay, let's look at that. Let's look at 3 guns and look at like kind of 3 commands. So down here we have the RS3 Reaper, and I kind of made up 2 guns here. So a MAME Hooker, this is kind of one line. Yeah, P1 damage equals command right to port 4 with ZZ. Then, like I said, it could be, the other gun shouldn't be on 4. It should be like 5, and this should be 6. So this is kind of what it should look like. But if you look at Hook of the Reaper default light gun format, you can see it's the same exact thing for each of them. And this is kind of what I'm shooting for. I'm shooting for light gun independent. I just want the commands in here. So you can just say, hey, it's player 1, and do this command when you get this signal. Then the software can, know who player 1 is, and it'll know what the command is, because player 1 will have a light gun associated with it, are assigned to it. Then with that light gun, you say, okay, I'll send this command for damage. So that's what I'm kind of shooting for. So then we can all have the same exact file. So then I can make a database, all the game files, and you can just download them. And then, like I said, no more custom files. So if you look at a light gun, they don't have like a lot of commands. As here I have the current command list for Hook of the Reaper. So you have damage, recoil, reload, ammo, ammo value, shake, auto LED, which is a Reaper thing, aspect ratio 16:9, aspect ratio 4:3, joystick mode, keyboard and mouse mode, and null. Then on damage, recoil, and shake, it doesn't happen on 0. So if it goes from 1 to 0, it doesn't work, doesn't activate. But if it goes from 0 to 1, then it will activate. So in a lot of the INI game files, you saw null, pipe, then the number, or do the damage or the shake command. So let's look at an INI file right now. So here is the House of the Dead. So for ammo, I have a lot of them because you actually can have different ammo values. I know it kind of went a little crazy, but I know for House of the Dead 4, I think the ammo is 30, so I went up all the way to 30. So at the top, you open your connections, then when you stop, here's the commands. And also here's your close command. So right now I support COM port open, COM port close, and COM port write. So this is what kind of like a game looks for. Then you have a lot of signals here too. And here what it looks like in the default light gun game format. So first you have your players. So you have 2 players, player 1 and player 2. Then coming down, so when the game starts, you can actually say all the players and open the serial COM port. Then when the game stops, you can say all, close all COM ports. Then with the signals, so when P1 ammo goes, player 1 use ammo value. Then you get the signal player 1 damage, player 1 damage. And like I said, if the value is 0, this damage won't go off. But if it's 1, then it will go off. Then you have the player 2 information. So you can get a kind of, looking at how they look different. So kind of now let's look at the program. So this is Hook of the Reaper. I know it doesn't look too spectacular right now, but it is getting very powerful. So let's load up MAME right now. And as you can see, when you load up MAME, it automatically connected to it, so through the network. So an easy one to do is DigDug, because it actually outputs some signals. So it's an easy game to just open and make sure you're getting the output signals for it. So once it's up, you can put a coin in, then you should see LED 0 start toggling. Then if you put another one in, then you see the other one pops up. So you can go, hey, everything's connected and working now. Then once you close it, it goes right back. And this is very similar to what MAME Hooker looks like. Another good feature I put into it is, before you start using the game files, you can actually test them out. I put a very stringent test into the files to make sure everything will work good. So it's a really good way to test out your files before you start using them. So if you come down here, you can go test, we can do the House of the Dead 4 file that I have open. You can test it out and it says, hey, everything looks good. It says House of the Dead 4, pass all the checks. But right now, let's, change something. So let's change the port number. Instead of 4, we'll put 7, which is not used. It's not open. So let's check it now. Oh, now it failed. It says command port right command port number does not match any open port numbers. And that gives you line number 22, port number 7. So if you look down here, at line 22 is exactly what we changed. And also it will give you a bad command because the port is not good for that command. Okay, so that's an easy way. If you make a mistake, it will check it out. Then even if you do, if you put a read in here, then check it out. It will fail. It says right now, COM port reads are not implemented yet. Please change it. So it gives you the line number and the command for it. And also it will give you a bad command. So it's really good to see. Reason why I do a really stringent test, because I like to test it out. So when the game is running, I don't have to check a lot of things. I can just go. I know everything is good. So there's no worry that, a COM port is not open or not used or some misspelling happen. So with that stringent check, I can make performance go really a lot faster with it. So instead of the INI, I also have default light gun. So we can do House of the Dead 4. This one is like that. There's no players assigned with light guns. So that means, you have to have players assigned to a light gun. So it won't even, so if it reads a file in and says, hey, there's no light guns assigned, it will error out saying, hey, this won't work. So it's kind of a good segue to go into how you can add light guns. So with an INI, it has nothing to do with that. So the INI side has nothing to do with assigning of the light guns or anything. It just reads everything from the INI. So let's look at how to add a light gun. So currently I only have 3 default light guns kind of set. I have the Retro Shooter RS3 Reaper, the Retro Shooter MX24, and the JB gun for IR. So if you select one of those, you'll see the baud rate, all the command COM port stuff will be not enabled anymore. And the correct setting will be put in there. So everything should be put in. So then you just have to name the gun and also choose the right COM port. And so if you don't actually know the right COM port, actually you can select it, then you can push the down arrow, and then you can go through the COM ports, and if anything's connected, it would actually show the information. So I know this one, COM3, is actually the USB hub that the light guns connect to. Then 4 is actually the Reaper Player 1, and 5 is the Reaper Player 2. So then you can go through the other ones. So if you don't know the COM numbers, you can easily just toggle through all of them, and you can find out where it is at. So what if you have MX24? Well, this one's a little different because actually the COM writing actually goes through the hub, not the light gun. And also it's dependent on your player number, which is set through the dip switches. So that's why if it's MX, these 2 extra options come enabled. So the last one doesn't. This is for the gun for IR. So only 1 and 2 have the command rights. 3 and 4 have no commands with them. So if you pick that, it's not going to work. So you have to pick 1 or 2, then you have to find where it is. So with me, with the Reapers, I know COM3 was the hub. Then COM4 was player 1 kind of thing. So if I had an MX24, so the COM was 3 there, that's kind of how it would be set up. Or if it was player 2, then that would be 5, then that would move down to 2, but the hub COM port would be still on 3. So for both of them. So that's how you would connect the MX24 light gun. The last one is the JB gun for IR. And the only setting that has on it, which is kind of different, is the analog strength. Currently right now I'm not using it for anything, but it is, you can set it in the commands. For the commands right now I'm using, it's not set, but you can use it. So that's why I put it in here. So if I do code in more options later, I have the analog strength there already. And also it does check. So if you do put like 400 in here, it will air out. Then you can just put something, it will go, hey, it's out of range. Because the way I set it up, you only can put 3 numbers in here. You can't put any letters or anything in here. So, but if it goes above 255, it will, air out. And it does some checks. So if you only can use a name 1 time, if you try to use the same name 2 times, it will tell you and go, hey, this name is done. So what if you don't have those 3 light guns and still want to use this option? So then you just come down here to no light gun, then you can put a name in it, but you have to fill out all the COM port options here. The other stuff is not enabled, so you can't put anything in here. So you have to still set all this up, the COM port and all the settings. So let's put the 2 guns in. So I have 2 Reapers, so let's do Reaper 1. That's on COM4, sets it all up, so I can hit add. So when I hit add, it will add the gun. If I hit OK, it will add the gun, then close, and cancel just closes the window and doesn't do anything. So I would do an add. And as you can see, the COM port disappears because now that COM port is used. So now you can't select that COM port anymore. So I have to go to the next one, COM5. And if you do try to use this blank number, it will error out and say, you have to pick a real value. And like I said, you have to put a real different name in. So then I can just do OK. So what if you did a mistake and need to change it? Well, that's pretty easy. You just come over here to this side and you have edit light gun. And also, you see on both sides, there's add other COM devices. I have that in right now, and it will bring up a window, but you can't really do anything right now with it. So that goes back to my goal number 1 is to get other stuff in, but I haven't coded that in yet. Right now, I'm just going for light guns and focused on light guns right now. So when you do the edit, it'll bring up your 2, right now I have 2 saved. So we'll bring up my 2. If I come in here, as you can see, so I'm on COM-port 5. I know I've used COM-port 4 on the other gun, so that one is gone. But my COM-port 5 shows up because that's the one I have right now. So if I wanted to change that to something else, I can. Or I wanted to change it to a gun for IR or to an MX24, I can. So you can see those become enabled. So you can do a lot of changes. And also this is where you delete light guns too if you want to. So you can delete and edit. Then OK, we'll edit it and close the window, and cancel, we'll just close the window and don't do anything. So the next step is do player assignment. So for default light gun game to work, you need at least one player assigned and also in the game. So if you saw in the other one, it had player 1 and player 2. So if I had player 3 assigned and nothing on player 1 and 2, it will fault out and say, hey, you need 1 on 1 or 2 or both of them. So I can easily now assign it. Then if you hit assign, it will just assign it. Okay, we'll go assign it, then close, and cancel will just close that. So I can just go, okay. So now I should be able to check out the game. Right. And then boom. And also another thing I want to point out, you can choose multiple files. So you can do 2, 3, or how many you want. And that's for both default light gun game files and INI files. They can do multiple checks on multiple files. So then it should get 2, and each one will say, pass in it. So that's a really good checking feature. And another cool kind of testing thing you have is if you want to send commands to saved light guns. So you can see here, it brings up my saved light guns. Also it can bring up the other comm devices too. So right now I can connect to the Reaper 1 on COM 4. So now I'm connected to it. So that's why disconnect becomes enabled while connect goes. So then I can write to it. So I can give it a recoil 1. So I'll do it a couple times so you can hear it. Oh, sorry. And my mouse was, because I was pointing at the window, my mouse was going everywhere. So. Okay. So that's an easy way to test out your light guns. You can connect to them and send the commands to it. Then once you're done, you can just disconnect. And if you hit OK or cancel, disconnect too. So how does it know when you load it up? And how does it know, for Reaper, it gets these commands. For MX24, it gets that commands. Well, actually, in the data files, I'll have these data files. I have rs3reaper.hor. And as here, you see all the command, and with what you send it when that command happens. Then for the MX24, it's a little different because it's dependent on player 1 and player 2. I have player 1, then I have the bar with player 2. Then for the JB gun for 4IR, the same thing. Then if you don't have those light guns and you still want to use it, that's where you pick the blank one. Then you have the non-default lightgun.hor. Then all this is just blank, and you can come in and fill in any commands that you want for these. So if you don't have the 3 default selected ones, you can put your own in here. You have to put the commands in here. Okay, so I'll talk about the last option, which is the settings. So the first setting is to use default light gun files before the INI files. So if you have a game file, for the default light guns in INI, this will kind of tell what to use first. So this will say use the default light gun file first over the INI. But what if you don't have the default light gun, but you have the INI? Well, that's okay too. If it can't find the default light gun, then it'll go look for the INI file, and if it finds it, it'll use that, and vice versa. If you only have the default light gun and this is unchecked, and it'll look for the INI, it can't find the INI, then it'll look for the default light gun. So what happens if it doesn't find none of the game files? Well, that's a good way to get the signal. So like When the main hooker does, when it first loads up, it saves all the signals to the file. And also, if there's any more signals, it will add them to it. And I have the same exact formula that does that. But default light gun kind of does it different. Is if you don't have the game file, it'll put the game file in with all the signals that it saw. Then you can take the signals that you want and you can keep the other signals in if you want to, or you can erase them. You know, they won't do anything if you have signals with nothing attached to them. That's fine too. So I just like it cleaner, so I take all the signals out. But if you want to know what all the signals are, you can just rename it, then it'll create the file again and it'll dump all the signals into it. So the next second option is to use multi-threading or not. So if you uncheck this, it doesn't need a restart. But right now, I strongly recommend not using it unless you have MAME open all the time, because if it can't connect to a TCP socket, it will like lag on the GUI a lot, where you can't use it for like 3 or 4 seconds. So that's kind of one of the reasons why I use multi-threading. But if you have MAME open and it connects right to it, then it's pretty easy. Then it won't do that because it's always searching for that TCP connection. If it doesn't have it, then it will use up a lot of the thread just for looking for it, then which will take out the GUI. So right now I have it set. I do plan to have a non-GUI implement, like you put it in the command line to open it, so you don't always have the GUI open all the time. But I haven't done that yet, so that's not implemented yet. So if I put that in, then you can also take off multi-threading. And I know some smaller platforms, you know, with like a Raspberry Pi, but maybe only have 2 CPUs. And if you're doing emulators, and I'm using 3 threads, that might not be the best. So that's kind of why I put it in for future stuff. The third one is probably what people will use. It's the refresh display of output signals. So as you saw, like when I loaded up DigDug, it was outputting the LED kind of 0101. This is try to make performance the best I can. I only update those signals every 400 milliseconds, which is 0.4 seconds. So if you make this number smaller, it will update the output faster on this window out here, so you can see the signals. So if you don't see any signals toggling, you excuse me, you might want to set this number lower. Then it will output the signals faster, and you can see it toggling. The last setting, excuse me, is to close the serial COM port when the game exits or not. So a lot of times you don't close the COM port when the game exits. And so I kind of put this option in to do that or not. So as you saw that test connection I did, I couldn't do that if I ran a game and left it open, because then the game will always be kind of using it. The Hook of the Reaper will always be connected to that light kind of thing through the game, kind of, so it can't use it for testing. So this is kind of more testing feature. If you're having problems, you know, always connecting and disconnecting to it, you can always leave it connected, and it might have some better performance. So with these 4 options, you can change it. Then you can hit the update, which will update it. You hit OK, it will update it and close the window, and cancel will do the same thing. It will just cancel out. So right now, you can find all the code and releases at the GitHub. So the GitHub is up here, is at github.com/6bolt. So a number 6 bolt, then /Hook of the Reaper. So it's hook -of-the-Reaper. And also have put a link in under the video too that you can look in. But thank you very much for taking the time to look at my new projects. Take care. Bye.